the Sefer Karatzil Shabbos Onig points out, he said, you look at the second letter of all the names, it's Meramis to the Tefillah. It's Avraham, so Beis is Boker, Yitzchak Sadi is Arayim, and Yaakov Erev is Arvis. And it's not the first letter, it's the second, that behind the essence of the Tefillah, it's the Chakras, the rising sun, Avram, he went ahead and he was, it's a separate share, but they explain how each one, Yitzchak was more of a quiet person, he was more to himself, Ola Tamima, and Ma'ariv is always Golas, and bad, so that's the time of Ma'ariv, so they tie each of the lives into a specific tefillah, but that's more, that's more Jewish, whether, it was more that they're focusing on, it was afternoon, but they tie it specifically to the tefillah also. But either way, so the question is, why don't we begin saying Talomata right away also, at the same time as Mashav Aruach? That's the Gemara in Tainus. The Gemara says, quotes a Machlokas in the Mishnah there, when is the Zman for rain? The Zman for rain, so it doesn't begin until either one opinion, Gimel Mar Cheshvan, or the opinion Rabbi Gamliel, the way we paskin, in Eretz Yisrael, Zayin Mar Cheshvan. And where does Rabbi Gamliel get Zayin Mar Cheshvan from? So the Gemara tells us because it took 15 days to get to the farthest place where Chazal said was in the Har Pras, to get the Jews who this came from Ola Rego, to give them time to go home after coming in for Yantif. So that was the furthest place. So it's 15. So it was 15 days to get back. So in fact, it's a discussion in the Rishonim. So what about Bizman Hazeh or post Beis Hamikdash? So why do we wait? Why not go back, revert to the original din of the Gemara that really we should be doing, asking for rain immediately after Yantif? So that already is a Machlokas Rishonim. There are the Ramban and others, the Ramban and the Ritva say Ein Hachanami, you're right. Bizman Hazeh, you start asking Talomata right after Yantiv. There is no, fundamentally it should be at the same time. You can't do it exactly the same time because you can't do Talomata on Yantiv, so you wait to right after Yantiv. But other Rishonim, the Rambam, the Rif, the Rush, and the way we paskin, they don't make a distinction between Achar HaChurban and before. They say you keep the original day of Zayim Ar Cheshvan. The Ran suggests the reason why is because even though there's no Chiyuv to be Ola Regel, he claims the minig was, even for years, maybe even years after Churban Habayis, Jews used to go back anyway, not the Torah's Chiyuv Ola Regel, but minig to keep the minig Avoseyim, and people went back, and after the minig developed to wait the 15 days to give him go back. But the bottom line is,
what would the Ritva say in Chul?
What would the Ritva say? What?
The Gemara brings psukim about Chul. I'm sure you're about to get to about when you start in Chul, right? So in Eretz Yisrael he'd say Matzah Yom Tov you start. What about Chutzlars?
No, right. So then, right. So
would it change one and not the other?
No. So the question, because the assumption is that they both. That it's a Zman for rain there, but that's what. In other words, the Gemara goes to 60 days after Tekufas Tishrei. That goes after Bavel, and Bavel the rain was nowhere close to that time period. In other words, but the Gemara, which is your point, the Gemara seems to be indicating that basically, which we're going to answer right now, is it seems to be that basically it's the time from the simple reading of the Gemara. It appears really you should be asking for rain right away. But because in Ola Rego we wait 15 days, which itself is a question. Like, Klal Yisrael needs rain, but okay, a couple of people, or maybe more than a couple, but definitely a minority of people are going to get wet on the way home, so therefore let's hold off on rain for Klal Yisrael. So why would we worry about the Miyad and not the Rov? So the Bali Buster, as I pointed out, mentioned, because the people are walking in the rain, they're really going to mean it. That tefillah is going to be more powerful than people. Oh yeah, we need rain in Israel. Okay, so we'll pray a little bit. But it's not the same. But the answer the Mefarshim give is because really, the Zman of rain really doesn't begin. You don't start asking for rain as either Gimel Mar Cheshvan or Zayin. That's the Zman when it's actually the time that we need rain. The time in between when Yantiv is over and the 15 days. That's really no man's land. It's not a Siman Klola if it rains, but it's not, technically speaking, there's nothing wrong that we're starting to do Mashav Haruach before, that's what the Rav will get into, that you want to do the Ritzai Hamayim before the actual asking, whichever Shita you hold from, that we do Mashav Haruach before Talamat, whether you hold from the Shita that you begin the first day of Yantif, based on a comparison to Lulav, or the way we paskin on the 8th day, according to everyone, you're going to do Mashav Haruach before, because you want to do the Ritzai Hamayim, you want to praise God on the Quasi Bakasha, the Ritzai, before we get to the actual Sheila. But we'll get to that in a second. So they point out that really...
why don't you do that in Pesach time?
No. So why don't we stop? 15 days before and give that time? So that's what the Mefarshim answer. A couple of answers.
15 days before Pesach.
Yeah, they should give us time to the Ola. Really, we're not worried about the Ola Rego. I mean, we are and we're not. So because the Mefarshim point out, those 15 days before Pesach are definitely the Zman for rain. And it's a time that we want rain. If we don't have rain, it's a bad thing. So therefore, we're not going to worry about the Ola Rego and not worry about Klai. So really, if there's a conflict, obviously if we need rain, we pray for rain even those people are going to get wet. The reason why we have this 15-day period, because it's not really the time for the Zman of rain is either Gimel Marchesh from the Zion. We pass in Zion. So really, we're not upset if it does rain, but it's not really the time where we have to have rain yet. So since it's in no man's land, so therefore, because of the Ola Regel, Chazal said, okay, let's wait 15 days. But if it was actually the Zman of rain, we're not going to worry about the Ola Regel. Others point out, practically speaking, that everyone, to go to Eretz Yisrael, people are going to leave at different times. You're not going to have a whole big march. You're going to have some will come a day before, 2 days before, a week before. But when you're leaving, everyone's leaving at the same time. So that's when you have the whole group. Others say, with Sarach Mitzvah, they're willing to walk in the rain. So to go to do the Mitzvah or Regal, they're willing to get all wet. But if it's pouring on the way back, they're not going to go. It's going to be a Sar Gadol and other issues. But the fundamental answer is really, it's not really, the point being up until Zayim Ar Cheshvan isn't considered the time of rain, and therefore we take in the Ola Regel. But that's only incidental. If it was the Zman of rain, then Chazal wouldn't have said to wait 15 days. So we see the fact they said to wait 15 days, and not 15 days at the end before Pesach, is a fundamental difference between those two Zmanim. And therefore, that's why we have that leeway. But that's what the Rav points out, that no matter what shita you take, we make the ritzoi for the mayim before we actually ask God. In fact, that's what the Rav's chakir is in the beginning of the shtickle. He wants to know, how do we view Mashiv Haruach HaMored HaGashem? Do we view it as part of the bracha of Machaya HaMesim? It's like Mechalchel Chayim, actually part of, even though it's only not the whole season, it's not the whole year, but for the rainy season, Chazal said, Mashav Haruach is part of the Nusach HaTzvilah. Or no, according to everyone we paskin, if you leave out Mashav Haruach, you have to go back. The question is, why do you have to go back? Either you have to go back because it's like you forgot Machalkel Chayim Chesed, you left out, you were Mishtara Matveya, you changed the Matveya the Chacham gave us, or no? It's not, it's really a separate part. It's really a ritzoi of mayim. It's really not part of the actual text, but we put in Maskir and Guruston, we put in the ritzoi mayim in that section, but it's not actually part and parcel. Either way, if you miss it, you have to go back because Chazal said during this time you have to make the ritzoi mayim. So the Rav said, so the Rav wanted to bring a raya. He thought it was not a part and parcel of the tefillah. It was a ritzoi. He says because a couple of things. He says there's a shita Tosis brings down in the Yerushalmi that we mentioned Mashiv Haruach HaMored HaGashem. We don't pass it in this way, but if you get Mashiv Haruach HaMored HaGashem, it says you can make it up in Shomei Tefillah. The same way we say B'sein Talon Matter, we do say you can make up in Shomei Tefillah. There's a shita in the Yerushalmi, Tosis and Tainus quotes there, that you can make it up in Shomei Tefillah. He says, what's the pshat? How could you possibly make, if it's part of the Shevach section, how could you possibly make it up? Even if we don't pass like that Shita, but obviously we see from the Shita that clearly you can't say, according to the Shita, that that it's a pure shevach, or else it wouldn't be able to. It's kind of like a quasi shevach. It's a ritzoy. You're asking God. You're actually asking. You're getting ready to set him up in order to make the bakasha for the rain. That's why he points out the Rav that's why if you forget there's a machokas rishonim. Let's say you do machaya hamesim. Before you start the third bracha atah, you remember you left out Mashiv Aruach Morid Hagasham. So there's a discussion in the Rishonim, Achronim. Can I plug in Mashiv Aruach Morid Hagasham right there, right after Machaya Hamesim, but before atah? So the Rav says, what's the nakuda? What's the issue? The issue is, how do you view Mashiv Aruach Morid Hagasham? If it's part of the matbeya of the tefillah. So he says, could you if you forgot to say could you put that in, throw it in between two brachot? Of course not. So if it's part of the matbeya, the chachamim, then you have to go back, and you can't. But if it's just a ritzoy the mayim, and we put it in that spot, so it's still samach bracha. That's also so. Therefore, the Rav said we paskin that you can. Therefore, saying it's another raya that you could put it, that's not part of the Mapeh. And in fact, that's what he says, the famous issue, whether it's Mashiv Haruach or Morid HaGeshem, or Morid HaGashem, depends on this issue. That is, the interesting is, the Ramosha says Morid HaGashem, and they say over the Rav is saying Morid HaGeshem. So in fact, that's what I mentioned last time, Rav Mordechai Tenva wants to take credit. Maybe he deserves it, maybe he doesn't, I don't know. But in the new Art Scroll Sidurim, now they have in parentheses, Yesh Omrim Morid HaGashem. Because he called up Art Scroll and said, I know Ramosha Shita is in the minority, but he's the Postek Hador. We should at least recognize that he says that opinion, even if you don't want to follow him in the main paragraph. So he claims that whether he gets credit or not, that. So the Yesh Omer is in the new art. It's in the new Art Scroll Siddur. So Rav Moshe is known to be saying Morid HaGashem. The Rav in Yeshiva, everyone says the Shita is Morid HaGeshem. What's interesting to note is based on the shtickle in the Harei Kedem. If he holds it independent, he would hold. It'd be Morid HaGashem like Rav Moshe. So whether he's just saying a shtickle Torah, not halacha or ma'isa. That's the possibility with the Rav all the time. The Rav was always changing what he said. As the Harei Kedem writes in the Hakdama, I know you're probably bothered by different steerers, different contradictions, and different shtickle Torahs. It's not my mistake, he said. I'm just telling you what the Rav said in Shir. Some days he came in, whether it could be the next day, and say, forget about my Shir yesterday. That's not the pshat, this is the pshat. Or it could be 6 months later, he didn't remember what he said, or he said what I said before, forget about it. The Rebbe always learned from scratch. He didn't go for the freezer year. He didn't go back and say, what did I say last time? And he just learned to this again, and if he came, well, that was a good thing. I guess 90% of the time he said the same thing, which means he was learning the sugya right. But once in a while, he used, I don't know what the percentage was, he used to totally give a whole different year. So it's a grammar issue, because we know because if you're just saying it independently, Mashiach Morid HaGashem, we put, let's say by, like the classical case is Kiddush, it's usually Geffen, we say Boer Pri HaGafen when it's at the end. Although the Svardim say Boer Pri HaGefen, so Chacham Avaji Yosef has the tshuva, then we know the Gemara says Gadol HaOne Amen. So Amen is really part of the bracha, and therefore it's not the end. It's whole shtickle. But the bottom line is the different minhagim, Sfardim, and Ashkenaz. We go with Boer Pri HaGafen. So the Rav says this would depend on whether you assume you're saying it, you just go right through. If it's independent, you'd say, if it's just a ritzoy for Geshem, like the Rav is saying, in the shtickle would come out, it'd be Morid HaGashem. So he says,
if Omen makes it not the end of a pasuk, then Bani Yerushalayim and Bani Yerushalayim would also depend, because you have the same situation there.
Right, in that case we actually enter Bani Yerushalayim Amen, we actually enter Amen to our own bracha, and that's, the Rishonim say that's for a different reason there, because we want to show the chiluk between the Daraisa and the Rabbanan, to show. But
grammatically, the reason for saying the Omen wouldn't make any difference. The question is it the Saf Posek or not?
Right.
And that would be the same with Bonei Barachim of Yerushalayim and with Bar Gefen. Same question. So therefore, those who say Gefen should say Yerushalayim, and those who say Gofen should say Yerushalayim.
Right. So, I mean, in terms of how you end the bracha. Right. Unless you say it depends how depends how you view the Amen, and you're right. It'd be a similar issue. But the meaning doesn't seem to be that way. But right, it's a good question in terms of depending how you view the end of the bracha, is Amen just added at the end? Is that really not part of the bracha? If you say Amen here is part, then it's not the end, and then so in this case it's a little different, right? It's the same issue because it's not in terms of how you're going to view it. But that seems to be a chiddush by Avadi. We assume Amen is not part of the bracha. Simple pshat is it should be over Priyat Gofen. And this, from a grammar point of view, is we don't assume Amen is part of it. True, God own Amen, but it's not part of the bracha. Pashas, yeah.
I still don't understand why we don't say Mashiva Ruach the whole year. Because if it's not, we're not asking for rain. If it's not, then why is there a certain time limit that we start saying that?
Right, so that's what the Rav is pointing out based on a Rashi and Tainus. He just says that obviously in theory you could praise God all year round, but since here it's more than just a praise. It's not just a classical Shevach. It's like a ritzoi for the Mayim. So he said,
so what is that?
It's a ritzoi. It's like you're asking for it's like begging the mercy of God to bring us rain.
No, but you can't say that though, because then it shouldn't be in the Shevach thing.
No, but that's what they point out. So that's why the Rav said it's like a quasi. That's why the shita was you put it in Shomei Tefillah, because it's not the classical Sheva. So it's either because we have a similar issue is how do we put Micha Mocha Avarachamim and Zachreinu L'Chayim? How do we put it in our first in a Shevach? Not a Shevach. It's a Bakasha. So in fact, some Rishonim don't. They say get rid of all the whole stuff. They shouldn't be in there. But we do it in there. So the different approaches in the Rishonim. Some say because of Lashon Rabim, but that's only if you're asking for yourself. But Lashon Rab, if you're asking for Klal Yisrael, then you can even put it in the first section. Or as others point out, the ultimate Shevach is as realizing, as we were saying, the essence of Tefillah, that everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the fact that we're praising God, that God, it's Micha Mocha Zachreinu L'Chayim, we recognize God runs the world, so it's kind of like the highest level Sheva. But whatever pshat you want to take, right, the Rav points out, it's not the classical, if it was just purely part of the Matbeya, then you're right, then you could argue it could be all year round, but Chazal decided to put it in only when, close to the rainy season. But in theory, if it was part of the Shevach, it could be in, but you could argue even then it only put in for the, for the rainy season. But the Rav is saying, it's somewhere, it's not a classical bakasha. He says that's why we have a hachraza. There's no halacha before Zayim Mar Cheshvan or December 4th. You don't make you make a klap tala matar, but that's just to remind people to say it, not midin hachraza. On Musaf Shemini Atzeres, part of the halacha is if you want to be able to say it in your silent Shmona Esrei, you need a hachraza. So the Rav claims that's part of this quasi din of we're making kind of a ritzoy, a sheva, it's a mix of like a shevach and a bakasha. He says that we have to make since it's a chiddush to put it in that bracha because it doesn't fully belong there. So then we have to make a hachraza. So that's how he bases on a Rashi and Tainus. But right. So in terms of that, that was the Rav shtickle. So it's an interesting discussion, the interesting Maram Rurenberg, which they bring down in the Torah, they brought that in Shulchan Aruch, in terms of the halacha is that if you forget Mashav Haruach Margasha, even now you have to go back. That's the halacha. Doesn't make any difference when it could be a day before you stop saying it. Once from the time you begin saying it to the time you end, if you leave out Mashav Haruach Margasha or Geshem, you have to repeat. The shaila is, why do you have to repeat? Well, you have to repeat because you're changing the nusach at tefillah, or it's just a ritzoy, it's for other reasons. Either way, you have to go back. So that's a given. The question is, what if you're not sure if you've said it? So then that's the Tosis, the Yerushalmi, that we go with Chazaka 30 days. Whether 30 days means 90 times or 101 times, because you have a Shabbos in there, Rosh Chodesh, some claim it's only 101, not 90. We'll just call it 90 anyway, just to make it simple. So the Mara, but the Mara Rubenberg claims that if you want to, so the halacha is, if you're not sure, so during the first 30 days you have to repeat. So the Maharam Rubenberg wanted to avoid this issue, so therefore he said, you can do it any time, but if you do it on Shmini Atzeres, you say over, you have to say the words before and the words after. You can't just say Mashiv Aruach in a vacuum, or it doesn't help. But you say a little bit before, a little bit after, and if you say it 90 times, so therefore that also establishes the Chazaka, and therefore if you're not sure, the next 30 days, you don't have to go back. In fact, they used to, in different yeshivas, they sing a song, Mashiv Ruach, and in fact, I heard in some shuls, during the Hakafas on Simchas Torah, one of the Hakafas, they go around, I guess it's a long Hakafa, or a short one, depending where you are, and they sing it, they go through it 90 times. So, whatever it is, that's the Maharam Rubenberg. So, other Rishonim disagree with him. He says, what are you talking? Where do you get this from? Where do we find 90 times? Where do you get that from? You need 30 days, and if you're not sure within the 30, so that's a machlokas we showed him. We pass like the Maharam Rubenberg, but the question is, what's this nakuda? What's the issue here? Whether 90 days is good or not. So interesting, out of all places, they claim them. Where did the Maharam Rubenberg get this from? From the Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara in Baba Kama has to deal with Shor Muad and Shor Tam, Parshas Mishpatim, Midmol Shilshom. The Gemara over there is talking about that in a Shor, to establish a pattern and be considered a Shor Muad, you have to gore 3 times. So the Gemara, that's the Gemara that everyone, it will get to a machlokas in a minute, how much is a chazaka, 2 or 3, but everyone agrees when it comes to Shor Muad, it's 3 times. With Midmol Shilshom, we learn out from the Psukim. So the Gemara over there, either Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi May, or one of the rabbis over there in the Gemara, he says, so if the halacha is that if an animal gores 3 times, 3 consecutive days, we consider them a shor amord. If richov nigochos is creates a chazaka, kirov nigochos lo kol shachin, how much more so if the animal gored 3 times in one day, certainly that creates a chazaka. That's the opinion in the Gemara over there. So the Maharam Rubenberg says, so too, if 90 times in 30 days creates a chazaka, how much more so 90 times in one day, that creates a chazaka. That's the raya for the Maharam Rubenberg. So there are a couple of questions. Number one is, we don't pass him like that shita in the Gemara Baba Kama. We reject it. We don't assume that creates a chazaka by Shor Mord. So how come we accept the Maharam Rubenberg on this issue of Mashiv Aruach? So we have to go back and step back and understand some Inyani Chazaka a bit more.
Why isn't it accepted in the Baba Kama?
Yeah, so either we could say is because you just say, it's like we have a bad day, the animal had a bad day. You can't bring any rayas of pattern if you do it so close to get. So 3 consecutive days, that's at least
who's the bar plukta? Like, why do we pass in the other way?
No, we'll see. No, the Gemara rejects it in terms of the Gemara rejects that opinion because to say how could you bring
Svara or out of.
You have to check. We have to see the Gemara again, but in terms of I think Al Pi Svara that they say because maybe the animal's having a bad day. You can't bring a raya. Humans have bad days. You only have a terrible day, but you have to get. It's not enough time to create a pattern. So we assume you need 3 different days and 3 consecutive days to create a pattern. But 3 times in one day, it's happening too soon to create a pattern. So there's a discussion in the Gemara. Machlokas, I think it's Rabbi and Rabbi Gamliel. In general, how many times something has to happen to establish a chazaka? So Rabbi says 2 times is a chazaka, and Rabbi Gamliel says 3 times. And So in fact, we find for different things. Actually, we find different times. So for instance, where do we find 2 times? Rabbi says 2 times. So we know there's a halacha of Mila So you have halacha in the Gemara, Umeisu Achim Machmas Mila. There's halacha of bris Mila, and we know that involves sakana, doing Mila, not sakana, you can't do it, but we know it involves blood, etc. So the Gemara talks about a case where a brother did a Mila, he died, they couldn't stop the bleeding, and then the second one, so 2 times it happened. We don't say, oh well, let's take a shot one more time. No, after 2 times we say no Mila. That's an interesting, independent discussion.
The third child.
But for the third child, we don't do. At least we don't do it right away. We see when it gets stronger. Maybe we'll do it later. Which is an interesting discussion in the Rishonim, Rabbeinu Tam, another Rishonim on. Assuming he's a Kohen, does he have a din of an aro or not? Because the Allah is telling me I can't do a Mila. So that's a separate share, but interesting discussion there. So then Kalanis is the other one. Kalanis also is a very complicated, I'm sure it's complicated to live through, but it's complicated sugya in general. But for our purposes, the devil's in the detail, a lot of details to it, but just simply what it means is, a woman married this man, the man died, and we're attributing his death to this woman. And then similarly she marries again, and also we assume, it's not that he got run over by a car, that somehow the connection between the woman and his death. So we say she can't marry the third guy because it's a danger. So we see by Kalanis and by Meitzu Achabach Matzmila, we say 2 times is a chazaka. Yet the case is by the Gemara by 3 times is one is shor muad, and the other one is vesos, that in terms of nida, a woman establishing a pattern, so therefore we say you need 3 times. So what is this? How come? So what's this? Why chazaka sometimes 2 times, sometimes 3 times? So there's a famous Ran. The Ran wants to say that really, that there's different laws of, we know there's different laws of sveikus. Savek Daraisa L'Chumra, a dow regarding a biblical law was strict on, Savek Drabanan L'Kula, a dow by a rabbinical law were lenient, a Sveika were lenient on, down on Pikuach Nefesh, either Machmar or Meiko, depending on which direction. So he wants to point out, really, it's a Sveika Dedina. In fact, he quotes, it's a famous Gra in Parashat Shoftim, when it says Ki Yipilava Mincha, that when you go to the base in Agadol, so this says you should ask a question. The pasuk says Ben Dam Ledam, Ben Din Ledin, Ben Neged Leneg. Why different cases? So the Vilna Gaon says because in halacha you have to know what the suffix. It's not this. Okay, it's a doubt. Therefore, do X. You have to know what the suffix is. We have so Ben Din Ledin. Do you have? It is serveheter. So Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. You're not sure if this piece of meat is kosher or not. Savek Daraisa L'Chumra. Then Ben Dam Ledam. It gets into so that's the point of Safek Isser. Then Ben Din Ledin is a din of Dinei Mamanos that Amotzi Mechavero Lav Haraya. The halacha is that there's a doubt by money, so we say possession is 9/10 of the law. Whoever's holding on, the burden of proof is to take it out. That's the halacha you do by Safek of Dinei Mamanos. And by Neged Tuma. We know Safek for Shus Harabim is Tar, Safek Shus Yachid. The different halachas of Tuma by Shus Harabim and Shus Hayachid. So depending on what you're in, so we see this. So that's what the Ran basically points out, that really it's a Sveika Dedina, how we paskin. Do we paskin like Rabbi, or do we paskin like Rabbi Gamliel? So therefore, we have to check the case. When it comes to Katlanis, Meitu Machmas Mila, Safek Mikuach Nefesh, I'm not going to say 3 times. Okay, we have to be Machmir, and therefore after 2 times we establish a Chazaka. But by Shor Hamuad, based on the Psukim, on Vesis, the Ran claims, which we'll see Rav Chaim and the Rambam disagrees, that's only a Din D'Rabbanan, so Savek D'Rabbanan Kula. So the Ran says we have to go through, there is no general rule, the Ran writes. We have to go through each case, and then it's a Shaila, it's a Safek and Dina, whether it's 2 or 3, so depending on what principle we put into the Safek, we'll come to it. But there's no rule, 2 or 3, it's a Svega the Din, and you have to go through each case separately. That's how the Ran writes.
Why is saying that it's not a Shor Muad Lakula?
No, that's based on because in terms of whether it's a motzi mechaver in terms of who's paying out. But over there they say everyone.
At the moment of determination whether it's a muad or not, there's no payout.
No, right. No, they're saying in terms of shor muad, they quote the psukim from Parashas Mishpatim in terms of how they get to 3 times.
So that's Xer Shakos.
Yeah, or more than So that one everyone agrees to. That's not a point of contention. But setting up a vesos and that the Ram claims it's only Draban. See, the Rav had a different shot. He said no, it's not a Sveika Dedina. You have to know. It depends what we're trying to do here. So he says if you're just trying to make a pattern, a chazaka to establish a pattern. So that's it. So then 2 times is enough. Okay, there's a pattern here. It's enough. 2 times is enough. We pass in 2 times is enough to create. No, it's not a suffix. It's not a suffix that writes a chumrah. That's the halacha. 2 times is enough. Kalan is 2 times is enough. No. So if 2 times is enough for a chazaka, so why not by shor amua, which that's the pasuk anyway, by vestas, and now what does it depend on? So he says. Like this, he says, because by Shor HaMuad, he says, it's more than just setting up a pattern. It's what he calls, you have to set up a chalo shem, which I'll explain in a second. What he means is as follows. There's a halacha that, let's say a shor gores once and twice, and the 3rd time, let's say it's a shor shel hefker, let's say he gores something which he's pater from. There's not an agicha mechayeves. So the Gemara says you have to have, in order to be a shor muad, it has to be 3 times where you have to be paying out, where you chayav to pay out, and the gicha, which is. So the question, if you're just establishing a pattern, the Rav said, well, who cares whether I have to pay or not pay out? If it's all about a pattern, then it won't make a difference. He says the fact that you need a negicha mechayeves, it's more than just a pattern. You're setting up a chalo shem here. It has to establish, and it's Xeris HaKasav, it has to be a negicha which is mechayev you. And similarly, the Rav says based on the Rambam, that Vestas is Daraisa, not Rabbanan. And it says, but not just, like same thing by Vestas. If let's say a woman had dam, let's say the 3rd time, and it was dam tahar. It wasn't dam that was that she became a nida. So it also wouldn't be a vesis, because it's not just setting. It's not by vesis and by shor muad. It's not just a pattern. It's more. It's a special xeris akasav, a special limud they learn out. It has to be a special type of dam, a dam which is metame the woman, or in the case of a shor, it has to be in the. You see, it's more than just a pattern. You're establishing a chalo shem. So the Reb says like this. He says, so when it comes to the setting up a pattern, 2 times is enough. But if you want to establish more than that, then you need 3 times. So getting back to the Mara Merumberg, he says like this. That's the Nozi Bihudis Kasha. The Mara, we pass like the Mara Merumberg that we go with the 90 times, 100 times. But against the Gemara and Baba Kama that rejects it. So the Rav said, no, what's the pshat? What was the raya? The raya was if an ox that gores in 3 consecutive days gets the status of a shor muad, then Kal V'chomer, shor that gores 3 times in 1 day is a muad. Gemara rejects that, Pisvara or other reasons. So the question is, if we reject it, why don't we reject the Ma'arab? The Rav says no, because by shor muad, why are we rejecting it? Because it's a special. It's part of establishing a chalo shem. We have to have it in 3 consecutive days. It has to be a shor and the gicha mechayeves. But by Mashav Haruach Amor Hashem, there's no chalo shem here. What are we establishing? We're establishing a pattern. We're creatures of habit. You get used to doing something. You want to have a pattern that every time you get into Shemona Esrei, you're going to mention Mashav Haruach. So interesting. They point out that what's the Nekudas HaMachlokes between the Maram Merumberg and the other Rishonim, whether you accept 100 times or not, 90 times by Mashav Haruach. So the 2 types of chazaka is what they call in yeshivas either a siba or a siman. A siba the word means a cause. as opposed to a siman, it's not a cause, it's a sign. Let's say, for instance, let's say when two of the handles hit 12 o'clock, everyone just takes off, whether from school, from work, or on lunch break. That's a siman. It's not that something happens, the clock turns to 12 and all of a sudden we have to stop working or going to school, stop learning, whatever we're doing. That's a siman. At 12 o'clock I know it's time to take lunch. But the fire alarm goes off when the smoke, that's a siba, that means it's the fire. You're assuming it's not a false alarm, it's the fire. So it's a siman and a siba. So by Shor HaMuad, what type of chazaka is it? Is it a siman or is it a siba? So one of the ones, if I say it's a siba, by you goring 3 times, that you gored 3 times, that had an impact on you, and therefore now you become a Shor HaMuad. Or no, I say it's a siman. It's not that I changed, nothing changed. I always was a Shor HaMuad. I didn't know about it. Once you gored 3 times, it was magala to what you always were before. That they perhaps not kamina, if an animal gored 2 times before the third, and then you sell it, and then he gores the third, is it a mekach tos or not? If it's a siba, so what kind of mekach tos? I wasn't a Shor HaMuad, it's your fault. He became crazy under your possession, not mine. But if it's a siman, then you can argue that it was always a Shor HaMuad and I didn't know it. But so they point out like this. So that's a machlokas by Shor HaMuad, whether it's a siman or a siba. So everyone agrees by Mashav Haruach, it's a siba. It's not a siman that if I said it 90 times, it's by me going through the pattern and repeating it. By me saying Mashav Haruach 90 times, I am creating it myself. So everyone agrees. By Mashav Haruach, there's no machlokas. It's definitely a siba. So that's in the case. The Ma'aram learned Shor HaMuad is also a siba, and therefore he learns out. You can compare Shor HaMuad, learning out Shor HaMuad to Mashav Haruach. The other Shor say, "What are you talking? But how can you compare? Shor HaMuad is a siman, and Mashav Haruach is a siba." So that's how some achronim say this Nakudas HaMachlokas in the Ma'aram Nuremberg, whether 90 time works or not. Is whether how you view Shor HaMuad. Everyone agrees Mashav Haruach is a siba. The question is, what about Shor HaMuad? Just to summarize, so we discussed the issue of Mashav Haruach, and about we started, that's a given. When we started discussion Tal Batar, Zayim Mar Cheshvan, we'll get to Chutz La'aretz later on. But in terms of Zayim Mar Cheshvan and Gimel Mar Cheshvan, and we pointed out that why not stop, so with 15 days to give the people time to come back. What about Bisman Azen no Beis HaMikdash? And the Ran says anyway the minig is to go. Other Rishonim say Echinami, you should start saying right away. In fact, based on those Rishonim, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and other poskim paskin, that if you started saying Mashav Haruach Moragashim and Eretz Yisrael in between, not everyone agrees to it, but based on those shittas in the Rishonim, that you don't have to go back. You don't have to go back for Mashav Haruach. That we says why not the last 15 days? Because that is a siman kola. That is a siman bracha. We need the rain, and therefore we're not going to stop. We're not going to have it stop raining. For the Ola Rego. And I didn't get to it, but the Rush will see. The Rush says the same thing in Bavel. We'll get into Tal Matar, but he says that Tal Matar was always set up for Bavel. So perhaps in America, outside of Bavel, could be different. Then we went into Mashav Haruach is considered part of the Matbeya, or is it just a Ritzoy B'Yama? The Rav wanted to bring different values. It's a Ritzoy. You could say Mashav Haruach L'Bored Agashem even after you finish Machaya Beisim before Atah. The Shita in Yerushalmi, you can make it up in Shomei Tefillah. This issue, whether it's Mashav Haruach Mored Hageshem or Mored Hageshem, the Machlokas in Lamdis and the Rav Sefer, which and in contrast to what they say, the Rav said of Mored Hageshem, and then we went into the issue of the Maharam Nuremberg, this issue of the comparison from Mashav Haruach to Shor HaMuad 90 times, whether Siman or Siba or not, and the two issues, how you explain Chazak in general, like the Ran saying 2 times or 3 times in the Sveika Dedina, you have to go apply the rules of Suffolk and see what you come up with. Well, no, the Rav says there is no Suffolk. The issue is, when it comes to, if you're just establishing a pattern, then 2 times is enough for Torah Vadai. If you're establishing a Chal Shem by Vestis and by Shor Muad, so then you need 3 times, and that's why the Rav said, even though we reject the Shita by Shor Muad about 3 times, that's because you need a special din of Chal Shem, but to create a pattern, everyone would agree that 90 times, according to Mara Rimberg, anyway, everyone will agree that 90 times in one day is a good enough chazaka.